Alright everybody, and we are back. Today discussing our third AFC East team, none other than the New England Patriots up in Foxborough, Massachusetts. So, give a little bit of background here for New England. New England, obviously in a much different spot than they were from this very decorated run they were on during the 2000s and 2010s. They won the AFC East all but 1 year from 2003 all the way to 2019. Of course, the common denominator there being none other than quarterback Tom Brady, but he's no longer with the team as of 2020, as most National Football League fans likely know. And looking just at this from a New England Patriots point of view, since 2018 and Super Bowl 53, they have not won a single playoff game. I know that is much to the dismay of owner Robert Kraft, and over the years he has been growing increasingly impatient. So, with that being said, we'll take a look at what went wrong here in the 2022 campaign because they were coming off of a playoff appearance in 2021. Seemed like they were starting to figure things out with their rookie quarterback, Mac Jones, and things were really moving in a positive direction, but slight step back last season. So looking now at the 2022 Patriots, as we can see, they finished with an 8-9 record, and looking down here at some of their more league-wide rankings, this offense was really not one of the more impressive units in the National Football League, and that could largely be attributed to Josh McDaniels departing to become head coach of the Vegas Raiders prior to the 2022 season. However, Bill Belichick and New England staff really didn't make it a point to bring in a new offensive mind to replace Josh McDaniels. Instead, he just handed the keys to Matt Patricia, who is more of a defensive minded coach and is probably more well known as being the head coach of the Detroit Lions just a few years ago, but he was originally the defensive coordinator of the New England Patriots prior to that position, so he wasn't officially the offensive coordinator of the Patriots in 2022. He was, I believe, officially their offensive line coach and a senior offensive assistant, but he was their de facto offensive coordinator and I believe their primary play caller as well. And it certainly shows here because this offense really wasn't excelling at anything across the league. In fact, it's quite difficult to find even one stat here where they're even above league average at 16 out of 32. So definitely troubling there, but I believe New England has addressed this going into the 2023 season, which we will mention when we get to their offseason. But looking at this defense, this is definitely one of the finer units in the National Football League. Absolutely a top 10 unit. They were 11th in terms of points allowed, but only 8th in terms of yards allowed. Second in the league in generating turnovers, fifth in the league in generating fumbles, fourth in the league in allowing first downs. So they really were doing their job, as Bill Belichick would like to say. And third in the league in interceptions, sixth in the league in allowing the sixth fewest, I guess I should say, rushing yards, and they allowed the least rushing touchdowns out of any team in the entire league last season. So, very impressive New England Patriots defense. And we could look at the schedule here, and it really shows most of these games here, the Patriots are holding their opposition to under 20 points, which I feel like is that magic number for determining whether the defense is really having a good game or not. And looking at this 2022 schedule, some of the things that definitely stand out to me, they start out 6-4, but they do finish the season losing 5 of their last 7. So definitely some encouraging stuff here with this 2022 Patriots team, but ultimately that's not going to be enough to make the playoffs, especially in the AFC as loaded as it is. So I have taken the liberty of highlighting here all of the games where this is basically all these games, the Patriots defense held the opposition to 22 points or less. And you can see this is the vast majority of the games. There's only 7 games, so 10 out of 17 games, the Patriots held their opposition to 22 or fewer points. You should be winning most football games then because basically all you're asking is you need your offense to score 23 points. If your offense could score 23 points a game, there's 10 wins right there. And odds are that's going to at least get you if you're not in the playoffs with that, you're very, very close to making the playoffs. So New England does come up a little bit short here, but definitely a lot to build on. And we can briefly go over some of the more individual stats here. A big part of this, it starts with the quarterback, Mac Jones. Starts 14 games last season and really kind of a brutal sophomore campaign. This is a textbook definition of a sophomore slump, if I do say so myself. Doesn't even crack 3,000 yards, 14 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, very pedestrian numbers, and so much so Bailey Zappi even gets a couple starts here, and he looks a little bit better than Mac Jones. He goes 2-0 in his two starts with 781 passing yards, 5 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions, but even then, that's nothing incredible. But it was noteworthy enough and better enough than Jones that there was a little bit of discourse that perhaps Bailey Zappi could take this starting position from Mac Jones, but I don't really foresee that being the case in 2023. And we can move on here to the rushing and receiving stats. And really the breakout player here is running back Ramondre Stevenson. This was Damian Harris's starting job going into the 2022 season, but Ramondre Stevenson absolutely just runs away with it. 7 games started technically, but 210 rushing attempts, 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, averages 5 yards a carry on the dot. So absolutely terrific rushing performance from Ramondre Stevenson. But then he also gets targeted 88 times through the air for 69 receptions, another 421 yards in the air, and another touchdown. So nearly 1,500 all-purpose yards for Ramondre Stevenson when all is said and done. Very, very impressive stuff from him. And then we look at the receiving stats for the Patriots, and really not a lot doing here. Very apparent that this team was struggling to throw the football last year, and their passing game just wasn't much of a presence at all. Jacoby Myers leads the charge with 804 yards and 6 touchdowns, but beyond that, there's not a single player who cracks 600 receiving yards nor 4 receiving touchdowns. So very unimpressive stuff there from the Patriots passing game. Then we can take a gander at the defense here, and there are a few standout players on this defense, absolutely, as this was such an impressive unit last year. Give a shout out to Matt Judon with 15.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, 3 pass deflections, 28 quarterback hits, 14 tackles for a loss, and he was actually their only Pro Bowl player last season. So the once mighty New England Patriots just sending one player to the Pro Bowl last year, but they do have a couple other notable players here. They do have Josh Uche, 11.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 14 quarterback hits. They also have Dietrich Wise Jr., defensive lineman, with another 7.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 3 pass deflections, 11 quarterback hits. Impressive stuff from him. And then if we want to look more at the defensive backs, Jonathan Jones, 4 interceptions, one of them he runs back for a touchdown, 3 forced fumbles. So love to see that from the secondary. And then also give a shout out to Devin McCourty, of course. Spoiler alert, Devin McCourty actually retires following the 2022 campaign, but he starts all 17 games and gets another 4 picks. So even in his twilight years, still very much a productive player. Now, with that being said, we could take a look at the 2023 offseason for the New England Patriots. And here, we could start off with the departures, and I will mention Devin McCourty again, just because he was such a productive player for them for many, many years, and he has decided to hang up the cleats and go to the Patriot Place retirement home. So hats off to Devin McCourty. If I had to guess, he's probably a Hall of Fame player. I'd love to hear thoughts on that down below, but won 3 Super Bowl rings with the New England Patriots, was a huge part of the success they had on defense during those runs, and he even played in 2 more Super Bowls, 46 and 52. But there really aren't too many other notable departures for this Patriots team. So they have wide receiver Nelson Agholor, who departs to the Baltimore Ravens, as we discussed in that video. They have running back Damian Harris leaves for the Buffalo Bills. But again, Ramondre Stevenson did steal that job from him last season. Then we also have tight end Jonnu Smith actually being traded to the Atlanta Falcons, which Really not a bad move because Jonnu Smith did have a pretty high cap hit for the production he was giving the Patriots, so smart move there by the Patriots just from a financial point of view. And then will also mention Isaiah Wynn, offensive tackle. And if you recall back to the Miami video, we just discussed him there, and he's now a Dolphin, where he will likely be their backup swing tackle. And now before we get to the additions, I will also note, I should have mentioned this before, that Bill Belichick is also the general manager of the New England Patriots in addition to being the head coach. One of the very few instances where the head coach is also the general manager. It might be the only instance of that in the National Football League right now. And also have to mention too that the Patriots did decide to bring in an offensive coordinator this season. They bring back a familiar face in Bill O'Brien. Many years ago was the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots before becoming head coach of Penn State, and then following that was the head coach of the Houston Texans, before more recently working on Nick Saban's staff in Alabama. But he returns to the New England Patriots and should give them a stabilizing force to run that offense. But now looking at some of the personnel additions on the field, the Patriots bring in tackle Riley Reiff from the Chicago Bears, and that's definitely a savvy move on their part. He's an absolute upgrade over Isaiah Wynn. Certainly an older player, but somebody who I think, as long as he stays on the field and stays healthy, he will be the more productive player, big picture. And moving on, they also bring in wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster from the Kansas City Chiefs. And wow, what a career Juju Smith-Schuster's had, starting out playing for Mike Tomlin, then last year winning a Super Bowl with Andy Reid, and now getting to play for Bill Belichick. So talk about a player who's seen some good coaching in his day. Then we also have running back Ezekiel Elliott, just signed last week. He figures to be the number 2 back behind Ramondre Stevenson, certainly more of a replacement for Damian Harris. And then I will finally mention tight end Mike Gesicki from the Miami Dolphins. So looking at those additions for the New England Patriots, it really kind of mirrors their departures position-wise. And I would say they really upgraded across the board here. I'd say going from Nelson Aguilar to Juju Smith-Schuster, definitely an upgrade. Going from Damian Harris to Zeke Elliott, upgrade. Jonnu Smith to Mike Gesicki, I would say that's an upgrade as well. And they even get Mike Gesicki at a smaller cap figure than what Jonnu Smith was making with the New England Patriots. So love what New England did here in free agency. They really didn't lose a ton, but the players they did lose, they were able to make those positions better. So now let's take a look at this 2023 Patriots draft, because this is certainly an interesting group. They end up with 12 draft picks when all is said and done. And the big headliner here is the 17th overall pick, Christian Gonzalez. And this was a player who had a ton of hype for the top 10, maybe even potentially a top 5 selection heading into the draft. But for whatever reason, he slips down draft boards and falls to New England at 17. Just an absolute physical specimen. I know Bill Belichick had to have been over the moon when he saw Christian Gonzalez available at 17. Probably ran that pick up to the podium as soon as he could. Bill Belichick's always been one of those coaches where absolutely a defensive-minded coach, but on his defense, he prefers to build his defense from the secondary back towards the front, I've noticed. He definitely values having a very strong secondary paired with strong linebacker play, and then the defensive line's a little bit of an afterthought, but definitely having a number 1 lockdown corner is fantastic for his defense, and Christian Gonzalez has the potential to be just that, potentially even right away. Some of the other more notable players here, they draft defensive lineman Keon White in the 2nd round, and then they even take a couple of special teams players here, Chad Ryland and Bryce Behringer in the 6th round as a kicker and punter respectively. So those guys will likely be starting as well, but as we'll see in a second here, they will be facing some competition. And looking at the remainder of these picks, they take 3 offensive linemen, another 3 defensive backs, 2 more receivers, and that's it. They really seem to know what positions they wanted to address going into this draft. So they've gotten a ton of depth at the defensive back position, at wide receiver, and on the offensive line, which you can never have enough offensive linemen. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at how New England puts this all together with the depth chart. And we are starting to get towards the end of the preseason now. Week 3 of the preseason is finally over, so teams are starting to make their final roster cuts, and the depth chart is starting to be a little bit more of an official metric we can look at. It's not really so much of a blank slate where, like it was a couple weeks back, where you just had players' names on here and some guys were listed as third stringers that you knew were probably going to be higher on the depth chart and vice versa. Now we kind of have a better idea of how this is really going to shake out. Though certainly a lot can still change in the next couple weeks before the Patriots kick off the season. So, suppose we could start out with the quarterback position, and I know going into training camp, this was definitely a bit of a story where definitely some people in the Boston area were calling for Bailey Zappi to be the number one quarterback here. Although I don't really think that ever had much traction, this is Mac Jones' job through and through. Maybe if Mac Jones comes out and just has an abysmal season, Bailey Zappi could step in, or if Mac Jones gets injured and Bailey Zappi plays well when he comes in, and then by the time Mac Jones returns, he just stays on the bench. I don't know. As of right now, I just don't really see a scenario where Mac Jones isn't the starting quarterback if he's healthy. But they do have a solid backup option in place if need be. Then looking at this running back room, pretty clear pecking order here. Ramondre Stevenson's going to be the man, and there was potentially a backup competition going on early on in camp, but the Patriots have since signed Ezekiel Elliott, so he definitely figures to be the number 2 option here. Definitely more of a red zone goal line kind of option, whereas Ramondre Stevenson will be more effective in the passing game and getting the Patriots up the field. Looking now at tight end, the Patriots do maintain 2 solid options with Hunter Henry returning to the fold and the new addition Mike Gesicki to replace Jonnu Smith. So can't imagine there's too much competition coming from the back end of this depth chart. This is really a one-two punch, if you will. And New England's always liked having a couple solid options at tight end, so that absolutely makes sense. Then I suppose we could look at the offensive line next, and honestly, I like this offensive line. I'm not going to say that it's one of the best units in the National Football League, but it's definitely an above average unit. We just talked about Minnesota in the last video, and I would say it's pretty similar to the Vikings offensive line situation. Maybe just a touch better than the Vikings offensive line, because I do like the depth that the Patriots have on this unit. But we can go down the starters here. Trent Brown figures to be the left tackle. Second-year man Cole Strange, their first-round pick of last year, definitely going to be their left guard. Then they have David Andrews at center, Mike Onwenu at right guard, their 4th-year man, and then Riley Reiff penciled in as the right tackle, though he has faced some competition in camp from Calvin Anderson and Connor McDermott. But as of right now, Calvin Anderson's on the non-football injury-related list, and Connor McDermott was more of a long shot to supplant Riley Reiff, I should say, anyways. But Riley Reiff is the starting right tackle as of right now, and I think he will maintain that position this entire season if he remains healthy. But the Patriots do have 3 rookies here on the interior of this line. Sidy So, Jake Andrews, and Antonio Mafi. All selected relatively, I'm not going to say super early, but 2 of these players were 4th-round selections, and Antonio Mafi was a 5th-round selection. So all 3 of these guys are, at this point, it seems pretty apparent that they're going to make the roster, and maybe if the Patriots can develop these players, they could potentially be guys who are either solid backup options for them or could even step in as a potential right guard or center option in the future. I won't say left guard because it does seem like Cole Strange is probably the surest fire bet going forward they have on this offensive line. Then finally on offense, we'll look at the wide receiver position. And the top 2 guys here are definitely well established. Returning man Devontae Parker and new acquisition Juju Smith-Schuster should be the number 1 and number 2, with Juju lining up in the slot as he usually does. Although for that 3rd starting receiver option, the second man on the outside, there's a bit of a competition going on right now between the veteran Kendrick Bourne, and second-year man Tyquan Thornton. Though if I had to make a prediction at the moment, I would say Tyquan Thornton likely wins that job. But we do also have two more late-round rookies here with Keyshawn Bout and Demario Douglas, both selected in the 6th round. And it seems like both of these guys will make the roster as well. So if New England likes what they see in them, they might have a nice little receiving core here. 6 players that they're really a fan of and could be productive. So I love to see that. And then, of course, have to give a shout out to the special team stalwart, Matthew Slater, drafted all the way back in 2008, still playing with the New England Patriots. Quite impressive. Definitely, definitely really don't see that anymore. One guy staying with the team for well over a decade now. Moving on to the defense now, and this defense was a really solid unit last season, and we can start with the line because while I do think that New England doesn't necessarily value the line as much as the secondary, I do think it's still a good one. Maybe not one of the best defensive lines in the National Football League, but if we're talking about the AFC, if we want to talk about a team like the Cincinnati Bengals or the Kansas City Chiefs as being at the forefront of competing in the AFC, I think New England's defensive line is right there with those teams, despite the fact that they do have just 3 down linemen. And while there isn't necessarily one guy who jumps off the page at you here, Dietrich Wise Jr. is probably their strongest player here, but they do have some nice depth on this defensive line. They have the second round pick from this year, Keon White, potentially filling in, and then their second round pick from 2 seasons ago, Christian Barmore. So like what New England has on this defensive line for sure, and then even 6th round pick from last year, Sam Roberts. Maybe a little bit light at the nose tackle position, but not a bad unit overall. Definitely an above average one in the National Football League. Then looking at their linebacker situation, it's interesting because it looks like here New England doesn't even have 4 linebackers listed. It looks like they're running more of a 3-3-5 with just running a nickel corner on every play for the most part. So definitely fitting for Bill Belichick. Like I said, he definitely loves his guys in the secondary. But looking at this linebacker position, we do have Matthew Judon, of course, with Josh Uche backing him up. Both of these guys are absolutely terrific for New England on defense, and perhaps even they'll run some formations with Josh Uche starting alongside Matt Judon with just 4 guys in the secondary. Might just be a little quirk of how Our Lads has this listed out, but I have a hard time believing that they're going to run just one of these guys on the field at all times. Then we also have Jawan Bentley as the Mike linebacker and Jelani Tavai as their starting Sam linebacker. And 3rd round pick, Marte Mapu potentially filling in here as a reserve. So like the linebacker room, definitely some strong players here. Matthew Judon's the best player on this defense, I would say far and away, with Josh Uche not far behind him. So far so good. I'm liking the defense so far. And then we get to the secondary, and while they do lose Devin McCourty at safety, they bring in Christian Gonzalez to be their #1 corner. Love that draft pick. Cannot stress enough how much I love that Christian Gonzalez draft pick because looking at them playing in the AFC East, they're going to have to go up against Stephon Diggs twice a year with Josh Allen. They're going to have to go up against Aaron Rodgers to Garrett Wilson twice a year. They're going to have to go up against Tua Tagovailoa throwing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle twice a year. So having a young, lanky, athletic man like Christian Gonzalez out there who can be coached under Bill Belichick's tutelage to really hone himself and into his skill set at the National Football League at the highest level. Love this selection. Think he's only going to do great things for New England. Then they also have Kyle Duggar at the strong safety position, 4th-year man. Alongside him, they have Adrian Phillips penciled in as the starter, though could certainly see some reps for Jalen Mills here as well. And then they even have Jabril Peppers as a backup strong safety, so they do have some nice depth here in the secondary as well. Then moving along, they have 2nd-year man Jack Jones at the #2 cornerback position, and Jonathan Jones as their nickel, with 3rd-round pick from last year, Marcus Jones, being a potential reserve to him. So this New England secondary, I would say, is firmly an above-average unit as well. I'd say their offensive line, their defensive line, and their secondary are all above average. So while they may not have the flashiest names on this roster, there really isn't a weakness that sticks out to me either. There's really not one position I could put my finger on and be like, yeah, New England just doesn't really have anything here. I mean, I know wide receiver is a very popular one to say with the Patriots, but with the addition of Juju Smith-Schuster, I do think that goes a long way for this unit. It gives them somebody who you know can make a play out there. And beyond that, I mean, maybe quarterback. I think we're really going to know a lot about what Mac Jones is this season. And a lot of this will come on him now that the Patriots have a steady offensive coordinator in place. They went out and got him a reliable weapon in Juju Smith-Schuster because think about it like this too. Yes, the Kansas City Chiefs did have Travis Kelce last year as well at tight end, but for the most part, Juju Smith-Schuster was their number one receiver, and they were able to win the Super Bowl. And I know they had Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback too, but if we're talking about evaluating Mac Jones, Patrick Mahomes is the standard for quarterbacks right now. He is the best guy in the league. Um, you want him to be as close to that as possible. And if he just has another season with 14 touchdowns and 11 interceptions this year, that'll be very telling about what Mac Jones is as an NFL player. So I think this is going to be the year we learn a lot about what Mac Jones is really made of. So that being said, let's take a look at the 2023 Patriots schedule. So here I have the Patriots finishing with a 6-11 record, going 0-6 in the AFC East. And I don't know if that'll necessarily be the case after going through that roster because I do think it's a very well-rounded unit. And we can take a look here at the games week by week, and it does start off very difficult for New England. First 4 weeks they go 2 games at home against the Eagles and Dolphins, and then on the road against the Jets and Cowboys. And I know it. Bill Belichick starting 0-4, that just seems very uncharacteristic of him, but these are going to be some really tough matchups, and I would be surprised if New England, I'm not going to say if New England wins one of them. I think maybe they could take one of these games, but I'd be surprised if they won more than one of these games. As of right now, though, I have them starting 0-4, but it does get better. Their schedule lightens up the next 2 weeks against the New Orleans Saints and the Vegas Raiders, both of which I think they take pretty handedly. Especially this Raiders game, Bill Belichick always seems to do well against his former assistants. And this was the matchup where the Patriots lost on that very sloppy play at the end of the game last year where it was tied and they started lateraling the football and then Vegas picked it up and just ran it back for a touchdown to win the game. So I think New England's got to come into this one with a purpose. Then they get 2 more tough divisional games, Buffalo and Miami back-to-back weeks 7 and 8, much like how they have Miami and New York back-to-back in weeks 2 and 3. Maybe they could pick one of these off, but as of right now, I think Buffalo and Miami are just the better football teams than the Patriots. I don't dislike the matchup of the Patriots against the Dolphins, but I think Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are definitely going to have big days. Christian Gonzalez is only going to be able to corral in one of those players, so we shall see. Moving along, though, they have the Washington Commanders and Indianapolis Colts right before the bye week, and I do believe these will be 2 wins to get the Patriots in a pretty good position going into the bye week, not a great one, so they would have a record of 4-6 heading into their Week 11 bye, which not the worst place to be in the AFC. If they win one of these divisional matchups, they could be 5-5. So nothing to be ashamed about. Coming out of the bye, they get the New York Giants, which I think should be a victory for the Patriots, especially with 2 weeks of prep. Then week 13, they enter another tough stretch here with the Chargers, Steelers, and Chiefs. Steelers on a short week. I have the Patriots going 0-3 over that stretch. Maybe they could pick off this game against Pittsburgh. I think this is going to be a very big matchup for the Patriots' fate of the 2023 season. I think by this point, if they lose this game, the writing's kind of on the wall that they won't make the playoffs. And I will say, too, with the Patriots, Robert Kraft, I know I alluded to this earlier, but he's been very vocal about the fact that the Patriots haven't had postseason success. And coming off of the wild card berth in 2021, His expectation for the 2022 season was at least to win a playoff game, at least to make it to the divisional round, and the Patriots missed the playoffs. So, while I know a lot of people would be certainly surprised if he decided to axe Bill Belichick as head coach, and I suppose as GM as well, just cut ties with him from the organization and flip the page, I think if New England misses the playoffs this year, that's the reality. I have a very tough time seeing Bill Belichick get another chance after missing the playoffs for this would be three of the last four seasons if he were to miss it this year, and in those same four seasons since Tom Brady departed, much much by Bill Belichick's own hand that the Patriots missed the playoffs three of those four seasons. I don't know if he gets another shot, so this matchup against the Steelers could very well be for their season on the line, and maybe for that reason, New England could win this one, but as of right now, I give it to Pittsburgh. And then finishing out the season, they get the Denver Broncos on the road, which I will give them that victory, and then two more divisional games back to back against the Bills and the Jets. So all their divisional games are back to back, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. And each of them, it's one home game and one road game. So let's do some tinkering around here a second. Let's say the Patriots do go 3-3 in the division, and they are able to pull off these home victories at Foxborough, at Patriot Place. How would that change their fortunes? So that would bump them up to 9-8, but as you can see, that still wouldn't be enough for a playoff berth. Well, what if they won this Steelers game too, with their backs against the wall, and they want to try to make a push? Even then, at 10-7, they would still be on the outside looking in. They would need to probably sweep the New York Jets if they wanted to make the playoffs, or sweep the Miami Dolphins, even get them in. Oh, did the wrong game there. So they would have to sweep one of these teams in the AFC East and go 4-2 in the division likely if they want to make the playoffs. And I just don't know if that's a reality at this point. While I don't think they're going to go 0-6 in the division like I have them projected necessarily, I wouldn't be surprised if they go 0-6, but if they went like 2-4 or 3-3, I could potentially foresee that. But as of right now, I have a tough time picturing the Patriots going 4-2 in this division. I just feel like this division is one of the stronger ones in the National Football League right now. So I don't know. It's definitely tough to call. And I would say if the Patriots miss the playoffs, Bill Belichick is likely done as coach. And maybe they decline Mac Jones' fifth-year option then and try to just turn the page on this thing entirely. Because it seems like they didn't really have a plan when Tom Brady left. And I think that was the biggest reason why they haven't had success in the 2020s so far. Bill Belichick knew that Tom Brady was getting up there and they needed to move on, but he didn't really have a plan in place. And I know you could say, well, Jimmy Garoppolo was that plan and Robert Kraft forced him out the door before Brady. And yeah, I guess that's true, but they still could have came up with something better than Cam Newton, I feel like, in 2020. And definitely by the time you get to 2021, taking Mac Jones, I understand the move at the time, but I think the idea was you could kind of give Bill Belichick a rebirth as a head coach, start a new era with him under Mac Jones, and really just doesn't seem to be the case so far. So this is definitely a make or break season for the New England Patriots. And before we wrap up, we can briefly look at the Patriots' salary cap situation going forward. So Mac Jones, after this season, they will have to make the call on whether to pick up this fifth-year option. And if New England misses the playoffs and Mac Jones especially has another poor season, I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I would quite expect the Patriots to decline that fifth-year option and explore their options at quarterback. Maybe not necessarily Bailey Zappi, though he is under contract for 2025, but they could look to the draft, they could look for free agents, they could look for a trade option. I don't know. It's very much back to the drawing board with the Patriots. It's not every day you're going to find a future Hall of Famer in the sixth round. So, that being said, they don't have a lot of money tied up in this quarterback position, so certainly allows them a lot of flexibility here and throughout the rest of the roster. I'm looking at running back, Zeke Elliott on a one-year flyer, Ramondre Stevenson just signed for the next two seasons, definitely be interested to see how that gets resolved. He'll probably want a big extension in 2025, but as we've seen with the running backs, not really a reality right now. At wide receiver, not really a lot of money invested here either. They have good value for Juju Smith-Schuster and Devontae Parker, signed for the next 3 seasons, both at a manageable cap hit, and then Kendrick Bourne just on a 1-year flyer. Then looking at tight end, both Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki in a contract year, so gives them flexibility beyond this year. Then even on the offensive line, Trenton Brown in a contract year, but not really a lot going on here either. Riley Reiff also in a contract year, so potentially going to need a new offensive tackle next season, maybe even on both sides of the football. Though Cole Strange is signed for the next 3 years, plus a potential 5th-year option. Moving on to the defense. This defensive line, everybody's locked up, it looks like, just about for the next 2 seasons. And Keon White signed for the next 4, so shouldn't be too much to worry about there. Looking at linebacker, they do have Josh Uche in a contract year with Matt Judon signed for just the next 2 seasons. But though Matt Judon is north of 30, so I do wonder if they look to extend him beyond 2024. And finally, at the secondary, really not a lot of money invested here either, and very much a lot of flexibility. Most of these players just signed for the next year or two, although Jack Jones is signed for the next 3. Christian Gonzalez on that rookie deal, of course, for the next 4, plus a potential 5th. So all in all, New England does have cap flexibility going forward. It seems like Bill Belichick's been very wise about how he's been spending this money. Not really tied up with too many big money players going forward, and if things do go south this season, it would at least put them in a position where they should be able to turn this thing around relatively easily. Definitely in a better cap situation than they were even just a year or two ago, where they're paying big money to guys like Nelson Aguilar and Jonnu Smith. But that being said, love to hear from any Boston fans out there, any Patriots fans. How's this season go for the Patriots? Are they able to make the playoffs? Is this it for Bill Belichick? Does he get fired after the season if they don't make the playoffs? And what about Mac Jones? Is he the answer at quarterback, or do we think that this could be the last year with him as the starter as well? Honestly, wouldn't be surprised if they turn the page on him if he has another poor showing. So let me know your thoughts down below, and I believe in the next video we will be talking about the New Orleans Saints, which is definitely another one I am looking forward to discussing. So look forward to talking to you guys again soon.